Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well out there. It's hard to believe that later this week, Super Metroid here will be turning 26 in the US. 26! That's like two-thirds of my life so far. While not quite as popular as the Mario or Zelda games, it's always been my personal favorite franchise from Nintendo. This title in particular often gets picked as one of the greatest in the series, and for some, of all time. But how well does it hold up today? Let's take a look. Released in 1994 for the Super Nintendo and Super Famicom, Super Metroid is the third entry in the action platformer series. As always, you play as Samus Aran, a galactic bounty hunter equipped with a power suit, capable of protecting her and allowing her to use various weapons, such as beams and missiles. She's also famous for getting caught up in battles with space pirates, as well as the dreaded Metroid parasites. The game was directed by Yoshio Sakamoto, previously known for being a developer on multiple classic Nintendo games, such as the original Metroid, Kid Icarus, Donkey Kong Jr., and others. With a team of 17 people, the project would take about 2.5 years to develop. Part of this had to do with learning the hardware, but another portion had to do with making the game look more cinematic, both through its visuals and audio. This is a major part of what would give the game its identity and atmosphere. Did you not get to play the previous entries in the series? No problem, as the game does a pretty good job of catching you up to speed. After defeating all the Metroids at the end of Metroid 2, Samus discovers an organism in its larva state. It is believed that its ability to produce energy could benefit civilization, so she leaves it in the hands of the scientists at Ceres Station, a space colony. Not long after leaving, Samus receives a distress call, alerting her that the station is now under attack. She hurries back to the station, and the game begins. As you reach the laboratories, things are not looking good. All of the scientists are now dead, and the specimen has disappeared. Or has it? Just as you reach it at the end of the room's hallway, Ridley, archenemy to Samus and known as the Cunning God of Death, appears and proceeds to steal the larva not long after beating the ever-living tar out of you. To make matters worse, the station is about to self-destruct, and you've got less than 1 minute to get back to your ship. Right from the get-go, you can see that this is going to be quite a different game than its first two entries. Effects like the steam pouring out to interrupt your jumps, and the whole environment moving from side to side, really add to the suspense. After escaping, Samus follows Ridley back to the planet Zebes, and learns that the space pirates have rebuilt their base here. After the player recovers from their heart attack due to the last scene, the real adventure begins. So just as in the previous two games, Samus can run, jump, crouch, and turn into a ball with ease. Some big differences now include being able to fire in 8 different directions, and even the ability to wall jump if timed properly. But the biggest and most important change of all is something the first two games could have benefited from greatly: the addition of a map. By looking in the top right corner, or simply pausing your game, you can finally view an entire map of every area previously visited, and even see the unchecked areas by finding map data scattered throughout the game. The only other thing I'd have liked to see was markers for any areas you checked but couldn't reach an item in. That said, this map was a huge step forward, and I couldn't have been happier to see it. But all of that would still mean nothing if the game was poorly designed. Thankfully, that is not the case here. As you can see, a large amount of love and polish was put into every little detail. For example, it's impossible to actually get stuck at any point. No matter where you are in the game or what abilities you do or don't have, there is always a way to get around it. That takes a lot more dedication to design than some people may realize, and it's something I have always appreciated about this title. The weapons and abilities you gain throughout the game are also great, and each have functions unique enough to make them all worth finding. Some of the most creative ones to me at the time were the X-ray scope and the space jump, which was suspiciously addicting to use. Seriously, I could do this for hours. It's like paddleball. The only one I'd say I didn't exactly love performing was the super jump. While the action itself is very satisfying to use, building it up, hitting the down button, and aiming yourself in just the right spot before your energy runs out can be a bit of a pain to get used to. This is also true for wall jumping, which took me a solid 15 straight minutes of adjusting to, even after watching these creatures do it 20 times in front of me. Still, this did not take me out of the experience at all, though it should be noted that it may halt some gamers in their tracks due to the lack of explanation. The same goes for the grappling beam, which will likely take you multiple attempts to get down. Exploring is still the game's main focus, and you'll be doing it for the majority of your playtime. While some parts of the environment will be easy to work your way around and find secret items in, other parts will not. The feeling of satisfaction and those general aha moments when you finally find a major piece of equipment after searching for almost an hour in your first playthrough cannot be understated. This game makes wandering around fun, and I honestly can't name a lot of other titles that make me feel that way. Unlike the earlier games in the series, which likely left you confused without any context, Super Metroid goes to pretty great lengths to hint you in the right directions without necessarily telling you where you have to go. It's a brilliant approach because it gives the player a sense of freedom and a sense of direction all the same. Something that could have been very frustrating is now, for the most part, really accessible and creative. The game also naturally has boss fights scattered all throughout Zebes. There are 5 major boss encounters and multiple mini-bosses to keep you on your toes. These encounters are almost always unexpected and completely frantic when they occur. It's just another example of the real tension this game provides. Even more than that is the design behind each major fight. All 5 of the major boss fights have stuck with me for various reasons over the years, and I'm still impressed by them even now. The 2 that really stand out to me the most, however, are the fights with both Kraid and Ridley. In the case of Kraid, he too begins to appear from the background, like Ridley did in the intro, but he's huge and far more intimidating than he was in the original NES game. Right after the game tricked you with the smaller clone, making you think Kraid would be closer to your size once again, boom! The game hits you with a huge burst of tension that you have to work around in order to figure out his fight patterns. And just when you think you're starting to get the upper hand, you find out that this was only the top half of him, as he emerges from the ground, now taking up more than the entire screen. The rest of the fight becomes a mix of platforming and timing your missile attacks just right in order to hit his mouth. Taking him down when I was younger made me feel the same way that a lot of PS2 gamers felt when first bringing down the Hydra in God of War, or their first Colossi in Shadow of the Colossus. Even today, I still get nervous thinking about how intense this fight was. Next, there's Ridley, yet another iconic villain in the franchise. He too increased in size since his appearance in the first Metroid. Unlike the battle with Kraid, this one is a lot more straightforward, but also very epic. There are no major changes to his attack patterns throughout the fight, other than him slowly increasing its speed, but the small, claustrophobic space you're thrown into here actually makes things just as tense as the previous fight I talked about. Keep in mind, this is the villain who led an attack on Samus's homeworld that killed her parents. If there were any villain you'd want to put Samus in a cage match with, it would be this guy. Defeating him also left me feeling pretty breathless and exhausted, but in a good way. I'd argue that this was the toughest fight in the game, though I could imagine fans having all kinds of different opinions there. Dragon, for example, was no walk in the park either until you figured out his weaknesses. And then there's the final fight sequence, easily one of the game's most memorable scenes alongside the intro. After encountering the larva, which is now very much full-grown into a Metroid itself, you proceed into the final area to fight Mother Brain once again. Things start out very similar to the way they did in the original game, at first. Shots come at you in all directions while you use your missiles to take out the protective glass and then Mother Brain itself. Once it's defeated, or so you think at least, you suddenly see it re-emerge with limbs and a creepy as all heck face to go with it. After dodging a fast onslaught of bombs and energy beams with little time to fire back, the boss lets out one massive beam that throws you against the wall and takes away almost all of your health. As Samus is left unable to get up or move, the Metroid, which has come to see Samus as its own mother, emerges and drains the health of Mother Brain before proceeding to give it all to you. But just as it's nearing the end of its process, Mother Brain gets back up and destroys the Metroid right before your very eyes. As one final parting gift, the Metroid sends out the last of its energy to you, enabling you to use a new, stronger weapon called the Hyper Beam. With this, Samus is able to blow Mother Brain out of existence once and for all. But there's no time to reflect on what just happened, as the planet is set to explode thanks to a time bomb. On the way back, it's possible to locate the animals who helped you learn the wall jump and super jump earlier. By blasting the wall in front of them, you allow them to also escape the planet in time. After finally reaching your ship, Samus makes a break for it and gets out just in the nick of time. If you did manage to save the animals, you will notice one small difference in your ending. In the version without saving them, you just see the planet go up and that's it. But If you did manage to save them, you'll see one tiny speck on the screen fly away as the planet's exploding. See that? There. Right there. Yes, that little thing. Should you save the animals? I say yes, for 2 reasons. 1, the developers said you should in an interview, so there. And 2, this ending proves to be the canon one, as you see these animals appear once again in Metroid Fusion, the 4th game in the main series. The rest of your ending, and how much of Samus you get to see outside of her armor, will depend on how long it took you to finish the game. This encourages gamers to go back and replay the game again, but faster, now that you know the ins and outs of everything. What really makes this title so special is all the little details, the show don't tell aspect that manages to say so much, despite actually saying very little. For example, in this section of the game called Meridia, Samus has to use a power bomb to destroy this glass tunnel. When you use it at first, nothing actually happens, until you begin to move again. Then it finally shatters. Why is that interesting? Well, think about what could have occurred in the player's head during that time. You go and try to use the bomb. You realize that nothing is happening, and assume that the bomb must not have worked. After coming to this conclusion in your mind, you begin to move again, only for the game to throw you off by making it shatter immediately, right after you've just convinced yourself it hadn't worked. This was one of the many sequences designed to throw the player off balance and keep them on their toes at all times, and it worked brilliantly here. Another great example is right after the fight with Ridley. What was behind the door he was guarding? Other than an energy tank, the room is empty. In the center, you can see what appears to be a broken capsule. Then it will likely hit you. Wait, this isn't just any capsule. This is the one the Metroid hatchling was in. That's when the anxiety sets in, with the player thinking they may have been too late to save it. It was only near the end of the game, when seeing the hatchling once more, that you would know it had actually escaped. And speaking of the end sequence once again, what the player likely didn't know the first time, just like in the game's intro sequence, was that the majority of the final battle was also a scripted event. While it is still possible to lose this fight technically, it is far less likely so long as you have the proper ammunition to go in with. Gamers of today have to remember that before the days of the internet and having access to guides and help like we do now, there was no one telling us these things, and so we usually went into these scenarios completely blind. And not knowing in this case only makes the encounter all the more frantic. I mean, even knowing full well that Mother Brain's Hyper Beam would paralyze Samus before the Metroid hatchling came to save her, I still felt a wave of intensity over the whole scene. It's just that well done. Super Metroid was and is still a triumph, being both an important step in moving action-adventure games forward and an important step in cinematic storytelling. There's a reason it pops up on so many best game lists and gets re-release after re-release on each Nintendo platform. It's an important piece of Nintendo's history and part of the driving force behind the term Metroidvania that you now hear to describe games like this one and Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Gamers coming into this title for the first time should be aware of a few things. 1, as I said before, there is a lot of exploring in this, and I mean a lot. While the environments are always tense and atmospheric, the game still amounts to you running around it all multiple times in order to find what you need and move forward. While that would normally be considered a chore in most games, this, to me at least, is one of those rare exceptions where you end up enjoying that factor instead. The other thing to bear in mind is that some of the controls can be a bit of a pain to learn, particularly the wall jump, super jump, grappling beam, and possibly the space jump, though I personally found that one much simpler to manage. I've seen these 4 moves in particular hold people back from completing the game on more than one occasion, so I think it's only fair I warn you about them here. Personally though, I was never detracted by these. In fact, they only encouraged me to learn how to take advantage of them quicker so I could find more hidden items. Keeping all those factors in mind, you should be golden. Take flight and enjoy. Super Metroid is something of a wonder. It managed to create a style of game where the players would actually want to find dead ends, just to see if they could get to more secrets. It gave us a cinematic experience with little use of words or dialogue, and an engaging set of environments and battles to truly make us feel like we conquered an entire planet. Because we did. Despite a couple of small gameplay factors that may not hold up as well for newcomers, it's absolutely earned its place in gaming history and is a must-play for all those interested. My only regret is that I'll never be able to re-experience those epic moments like I did for the first time, ever again. And that's going to do it for this video. thanks so much for watching, and let me know your thoughts on this game in the comments below. I'll see you all again next time. Save the animals.